What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Valley Vibes. I'm Lindsay, that's Flex, and we're in the Four Peaks minibar. And today we'll be joined by one of the most widely respected NBA trainers and skills coaches, also a keynote speaker and author. We're talking with Drew Hanlen. Drew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Excited to spend some time with you guys.
So, of course, we're talking NBA draft. It's the time of the year. One of the things that I am curious to know a little bit more about, that since you work with a lot of young up-and-coming athletes, is how do you kind of prepare them for pre-draft workouts? And what kind of goes into those workouts, and what are teams trying to evaluate within them?
Yeah, so the pre-draft process is honestly the biggest 2 to 3 months of a prospect's life. It's their chance to really evolve as a player, grow as a player, improve their weaknesses, showcase their strengths, and ultimately, slot themselves in a good situation that will help them for the next 5, 10 years. Just because the team they get drafted is so important in the young prospect's career. And so what happens a lot of times is there's really different prospects and they go through different things. So I'm going to walk you through it. So you got lottery picks that are like bona fide top 10, top 14 picks. Those guys usually are so protected by their agents, which means all they're doing is really spending 2.5 months preparing for the NBA. They're, going through film edits. They're going through 2-a-days on the court. One of those being a skill workout. One of them was being, a shooting workout at night. They're doing their lifting. They're doing some kind of yoga or stretching or, treatment every day. I mean, it is nonstop, just basketball. And for the first time in their life, they don't have class. They don't have any other traveling, because a lot of these guys, when they were younger, they're traveling around the country to tournament after tournament. It is all development for 2.5 months. And the top 15 guys, those guys are not going to compete against each other in workouts. So they're only doing individual workouts. I mean, it's so much to the point where there's been times where agents will get mad at me for even me guarding the player because they're like, we can't have a rolled ankle. We can't have, any kind of tweak or, anything. So it's a lot of 1-on-0, but it is a chance to really improve in certain areas that they want to improve. Then you have the guys that are outside of the lottery that are, still first round projected picks. Those guys are mixing in the skill work that I mentioned earlier with the top guys, but they're also competing because in workouts, they're going to have to play 1-on-1 and 3-on-3 against the other top prospects, and they're really jockeying for positions. Then you have the guys that are second rounders. Those guys are very similar to the late first rounders, but they're going to have to spend a lot of time on the road. They're probably doing 15 workouts in the matter of 30 days. So they're going to be, basically have like a month and a half to prepare. And then after that, they're just traveling and trying to, find one team that'll fall in love with them. And then you got the undrafted guys that are kind of on call at any point. And those guys will try to station themselves in certain areas. So they might go up Northeast and spend, time in New York because they know if somebody dropped out of a New York Knicks workout or a Brooklyn Nets workout or a Philly workout or a Boston workout or a Toronto workout, they can get there quick and be kind of the guy that gets slotted in. So that's a long-winded answer to tell people exactly what goes on, but really it's just a time to really go in depth and improve. And all of this leads up to pro days where all the GMs and scouts will come watch them for a 45-minute workout. And then they'll jockey during those workouts that the teams host. And then obviously draft day, they hear where they get to spend their first part of their career.
Drew, I got a question, man. So we talk about all the measurables. We talk about the height, wingspan, weight, stuff like that. What are some of the what do things do teams value about prospects that we maybe don't hear about as much? That's besides the attributes. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, I had an old school coach one time that he called me, and the first question he'd always ask me is, "Can he play?" And he goes, "That's the first question that nobody ever asks." Right now everybody's worried about different things, but can he play? Like, can he play? The second thing is a lot of teams will rank guys 1 through 9. 1 being they can be a number 1 option on a championship team, or can they be a number 2 option on a championship team, or can they be a number 3 option, and so on. And if they're outside of 9, that means they're not a rotation player on a championship team. And so that's the next question is, what can he eventually be in his, prime? Then another question is, How is he going to help us, and how is he going to hurt us on offense? How is he going to help us, and how is he going to hurt us on defense? And then how is he going to help us, and how is he going to hurt us in the locker room? Those are three kind of questions that people don't ask enough when they're analyzing prospects, when you're talking about, media members or stuff like that. But it's you're asking those things. So, for instance, you guys being Suns, it's like, hey, who can help us on offense? Who can help us on defense? Who can help us in the locker room? We don't want characters that might not fit in with our rest of our guys. And then also, how do they fit in? Then you ask the other question of like, what is their NBA skill? What's going to translate? There's a lot of guys that can get buckets in college that have went to the NBA and found themselves in the G League or overseas because they don't have an NBA skill. Are they a great defender? Are they a knockdown shooter? Are they somebody that can be a 3-and-D guy that can be a spot-up shooter that also can be a great defender? Are they a six-man type guy that is a volume bucket getter that can actually translate? Rebounding. Are they a guy that can rebound, for their position and for their size? So that's another thing that a lot of people just overlook. And then the last thing that I always talk about is when you're evaluating a prospect, you also have to look at what's their timeline and does that fit your timeline? So if you're in win now mode, you might not draft somebody that is a great prospect, but they just don't fit your timeline. You need to make sure that they develop at the same rate that you need them at. And, especially contenders, they need good players on cheap contracts, which is why they have to hit home runs in the draft.
Yeah, and the Suns are absolutely in that position right now. There's a lot that goes into prospects and figuring out who they might turn into throughout their NBA career. But what would you say are some of the skill sets or talents that might be the toughest to teach? Obviously, we know a little bit of development is going to be the case with all these guys, but what are those things that are just like really hard to get through to guys if they don't already have it coming into the league?
Yeah, I would say number one is IQ. You need to be able to have a good feel for the game. And you look a lot of times, you got guys like, I work with Tyrese Halliburton. He has a natural instinct for the game that you can't really teach. We can teach moves, you can teach reads, you can improve their decision-making ability, but the feel for the game, the IQ of the game, you want some of that entering the NBA. Another thing that you want is to be able to see how they are, like the intangibles, like the leadership qualities, do they love basketball? Because if they don't love basketball, they're not going to live in the gym, so they're not going to develop at the rate that you think that they are. Also little things like, are they winners? It's weird, but if you look at guys that have won at every level, they've won at high school, they've won in college, they usually figure out a way to contribute to winning at the NBA level. And then as far as skills go, it really depends because you see a lot of college players that will transition and become role players. And the stars, we all know who the stars are. Every once in a while we'll miss on somebody where you thought they were going to be a star, but it doesn't translate. Like my biggest stay away from them are guys that are always have been bigger than the rest of their peers. So if you look at a name drop, but if you look at some of the players that have been picked high and then that have fell off and haven't become what they want, it's usually because they have a bigger body and they're stronger and they're using their physical skills instead of their actual skill set. Those are the guys that usually don't translate. The guys that have good size for their position and can shoot well, the Devin Bookers, the Klay Thompsons, the Tyler Heroes, all those guys, they all basically came in under projected and they always end up doing better. So for me, I always look at, do they have good size for the position? Can they shoot? Do they have a good feel? And then the players that I'm avoiding are they undersized for their position or have they always been bigger? And so that's what they've been reliant on. And then do they have weaknesses that can't be easily trained or converted? So if they have big hitches in their jump shot instead of good touch and stuff like that.
Man, I love this, man. This is fun. So you just brought up a name, Tyrese Halliburton. I'm going to bring up another Tyrese that I know you worked with, Tyrese Maxey. So the Suns have a guy in Ryan Dunn that they seem to be targeting, small forward out of Virginia, fantastic defensive player, high motor, a lot of the intangibles, but his biggest issue is shooting the basketball. He shoots 20% from three and 53% from the line. How do you fix that, man? I know you helped Tyrese Maxey go from 29% to NBA All-Star. How do you fix something like that?
Yeah, so the first thing you do is you want to basically work with what is working. And, so I always start at the top of the release and see if they have good hand positioning on the ball at the release. If they do, then it's pretty simple. If you don't, then you have to kind of start over from scratch because their hand positioning is the most important thing. After you get that, then you work on the release. Just consistent follow through, making sure that the ball is rolling off of the pointer finger and the middle finger so that you get good backspin. Then after that, you work on the lift point. That way you can get a straight shot. And then after that, you work on connecting the lower body and the upper body so that you can expand your range and have good fluidity, regardless what type of shot you're shooting. The thing that I always look at is, do they have things that we can start with and tweak instead of having to scrap? So you look at a guy like Jason Tatum, for instance. He shot 34% at Duke from three, but he had a really good release point. And so in the pre-draft process, what we were doing is we were working on lowering his pocket so that he had more arc. More arc means more room for error because the drop angle improves. And then Jason shot 43% his rookie season, and so that's a great example of he already had a good release point, so we were like, oh, all we got to do is just fix the kind of the set point. There's other times where we've had to completely start from scratch, and that's just a longer process. The other thing to take in consideration is the longer somebody has identified as a non-shooter, the harder it is to get them confident enough to shoot in games. There was a guy that I worked with, my first NBA player that I ever worked with was David Lee. And David was a two-time All-Star, and he also won a championship. But when we saw the game evolving, he played when the power forward was a power forward. That's when it was Zach Randolph and Blake Griffin was banging around and Kevin Love before he shot threes. And, you had all the Gasol brothers. And like, that was what it was. It was all, mid-post and banging inside hooks and little fadeaways. It was not, space fours. And when we saw the league kind of, transitioning to more four men being stretch fours, we started shooting threes. And in workouts, he would make 80% of his threes.
Wow.
I mean, 80%. And it was fluid. It was natural. Mid-range, even in games, he was an assassin. You know what I mean? He would never miss his mid-range shots. That's what made him an all-star. But what we saw is there was a reluctancy to shoot threes because he never identified, himself as a three-point shooter. And it was almost too late in his career. And so what you need is you almost need a little bit of fool's gold of guys believing that they're shooters, even if they're not going in, so that once they do develop the right, proper mechanics, then they have the willingness to shoot them with the same confidence that, somebody that's growing up a good shooter would have.
Absolutely. All right. So you did bring up IQ just a little bit ago. There is a certain guy on this Suns team who you at one point in time were very complimentary about his IQ. I'm talking about Bradley Beal, of course. What are some things about Brad that are unique and why you think his IQ is so high?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Brad obviously has evolved a ton as a player. He started out his career and everyone compared him to like an old Ray Allen where he was coming off pin downs. He was moving without the ball. He was more of a spot up shooter with John Wall handling the primary responsibility with the ball in his hands. And then, when John started, battling injuries, Brad became a point guard. And that's when you saw him, evolve as both a playmaker and a scorer. He had those back-to-back 30-point seasons. Then he grew with, the point guard responsibilities. You saw career high in assists. Then he comes to Phoenix. And, when he came to Phoenix, he felt like, okay, my job is to take a little bit more of a back seat and make sure that I'm a distributor. I'm more efficient. And you saw him career high in efficiency. He shot 55% from the field, 43% from three this season. And but he didn't score at the same rate that he was, people were accustomed to him scoring. And it was because he felt like he had to be more of a playmaker and distributor to get everybody involved instead of being, the kind of the scoring threat that everyone grew accustomed to. It was funny, I've been working with KD here, getting him ready for the Olympic stuff. And we were talking about that. And I said, one of the biggest mistakes Brad made was he came in thinking he was going to have to take a back seat instead of all of them, figuring out a way to be, instead of 1, 2, and 3 being 1A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. And so, that's the IQ. Brad just kind of took it upon himself to say, I know what we need. We need, a distributor. And I think that what you'll see next year is I think he's going to still keep a lot of that, but I think that there'll be more random basketball where he can pick his spots and choose so that he can be that killer that he's still capable of being.
Man, I love this. You were supposed to be on the last show. We just had this conversation about Brad. I got a question, man. So tell me something about Brad that you love. Because I coach, I train, not at your level, brother. You the man. But, at the level I did it, there's always something that you pick up from a guy that you kind of like from that player or you love from that player that maybe the normal person doesn't see in a basketball game. Tell me something about Brad that you love. Something behind the scenes that you love about his game that's different than most people.
I mean, first off, I've been with Brad. He was my first ever client. I've been with him since he was 13 years old. I was 17 when we first started out. So we've been training together for 17 years. It's been, I always give him a lot of credit for where I'm at because without his success, a lot of other people wouldn't have given me a chance. The thing that I love about him is not only his adaptability, but also just his ability to constantly look at ways for him to improve himself. Not many people that have become an all-star one way are willing to try something else to try to win basketball games. And he was on teams that, due to injuries, due to just rosters, he wasn't able to compete. And all he's ever wanted to do was win basketball games. And so he's constantly throughout his career changed and evolved his game just so that he could try to win more basketball games. Early on, that was moving without the ball and being a spot up shooter. And then after that, it became, being a scorer and the back-to-back 30-point years. And then after that, it became, now you got to get your teammates more involved in Washington. And he was passing out of double teams when teams were blitzing him and squeezing the ball out of his hands. And then he goes to Phoenix. And again, he tries to adapt and he becomes the most efficient, version of himself. And I know he had an ending that he wished he could have had back, that last game. But if you look at his season overall, he had a really good year, and so now it's just about putting those pieces together and making sure that he can become the best version of himself in the way that makes him feel good, but also contributes to team success, which then ultimately brings the team even more success. And so it's just a battle we all play with ourselves. It's you got three of the best bucket getters in the world on your team. And, they're constantly saying, all of them had great years individually. If you look at on paper, efficiency-wise, all three of them did really, really well. But then when you look up and you go, man, they weren't a high seed. They didn't win, any playoff series. That's where you ask yourself, why? It's not good enough to be individually talented. Now we got to figure out ways to win together. And I think that's what you'll see, hopefully moving forward next year, is more random basketball, less of take turns basketball, and then hopefully – that random basketball allows the role players to not feel like they have to go get theirs. And instead they can kind of get theirs when the stars, get taken out of the offense by the defense.
We're really looking forward to it. We're hoping that it'll be, 1 year of the big three kind of under their belt, hopefully fewer injuries having to deal with, and that next year is a much more exciting and fun season for Suns fans, ourselves included.
Absolutely.
Drew, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and for joining us and providing all the insight for us today.
Awesome. No problem. Thank you guys for having me on. And like I said, I'm a Suns fan because I want Brad to always do well. So hopefully I'm down in Phoenix and enjoying some wins with you guys this season.
Absolutely.
Let's
and everyone,
go, Drew.
Be sure to give Drew a follow on social at Drew Hanlen. We'll see you next time.